So I've been thinking about it, and I think I realized there's sort of a problem with how I've been doing things on this channel the whole time. The whole time. So let me sort of, take you through this, all right? Because sort of when I started and when I first came in here, Chris and I have been making, my friends and I have been playing PCGs sort of the whole time on our own. It was just our group of friends. And I came in and I saw the paper games community, and it was awesome. I love like this explosion of creativity and how people encouraged one another and looked at each other's games, and sort of, it was a self-supporting community but my sort of one criticism I had on that community, something that I felt like, hey, here's something that our PCGs can offer that this community is not already doing, was that we had a shared universe. We had the PCG universe. That was something that we were doing, that we had different, that we could offer this community. I saw it as a flaw because in a community where, the whole idea is that you're inspiring each other, it makes sense to be building on each other's work, to be sort of working together to build some sort of bigger piece of art. And of course, you're all building your own things. But, the fact of the matter is, like, if you watch IPGS or KCOKT or Reality Stupid, and all of them are making great games, but it's not as easy necessarily for a fan of one to follow, there still was a ton of overlap. They did all reinforce each other, but I'm saying, like, if a new creator makes a game, there's no overlap in characters, there's no overlap in story or anything like that, right? So, there's not as much incentive to go from one creator to another to watch their videos. So with a shared universe, it's like, hey, if you're watching my videos and then Epic Worlds PCG starts making all these PCGs and they use my characters, they use my stories, they're like, it's all tied in, it's all interwoven, that's a strength, right? So that was sort of my criticism, and that was sort of what I aimed to offer. But, looking back on what we've been doing, I feel like I haven't really been doing that. Or at least not fully, not really, not completely, right? So the thing is, most of the PCGs I've made in this modern era, and I'm sort of loosely defining my modern era as like since I've started the YouTube channel, basically, right? If you really think about it, those PCGs have just been sort of all over the place. Sure, they're all, or most of them are within the PCG universe. Some of them aren't even, like Pokemon Stop is in like the Pokemon universe, right? Technically, most of my PCGs are in a shared universe. However, in practice, most of them are just sort of a new story. It just takes place in some random place, could be a random planet, could be a random... So like, for example, we've got my PCG, The Maze. In practical terms, it's not clearly directly connected to most of my other games. Sure, if you know the whole history of PCGs, you could like draw a line and show how they're all connected to each other. But it's a very sort of loose connection. If someone just randomly comes in here, they only know the most iconic characters, it's kind of hard to see it, right? There's The Maze, there's Granny. Granny has like nothing to do with anything. My PCG Tree, that had a whole trilogy. There was like Tree and Bot's Bridge and, all that stuff, which was sort of its own thing. Each one of the PCGs I've made, sure, they're part of the PCG universe, but most of them have been very far off of the main storyline, if there can be said to be a main storyline at all. That wasn't always the case. When I was like many years ago, my PCGs were sort of like the glue that was holding together my friends, all of my friends didn't really care about having PCGs as a universe. They would just make their own stories that had no connections to each other. And then I would make a game that like makes a connection between like Chris's game and Pierre's game, or, whatever, stuff like that. I would be the one to tie the whole thing together. I sort of was I was like creating that connective tissue, right? And now I feel like I'm not doing that. I feel like, sure, all the games are in the main universe, technically, and sure, there are connections you can find, but they're sort of like off the beaten path. Now, why does that matter? I think it matters quite a bit, and let me make you an argument as to why. So why do we care about a shared universe at all? I think the best, a really easy example of that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, right? So if you've ever seen the Marvel movies, especially at the beginning, people cared about that a lot, and their formula was really, really simple. Yes, they had a lot of different stories that started out separate, and then they came together. But these stories were all closely tied to each other. They were, at least at the beginning, you had Iron Man, you had Hulk, you had Thor. All of those stories took place in the same year at the same time. And so you had each one of those stories, they had post-credit scenes where you could see one of the other heroes or how, it would tease one of the other movies. And then finally, they all came together in the Avengers. And then since that time, they sort of built on that energy. And sure, they introduced more characters, and sure, they expanded their universe, and bit by bit, they would get further and further away from that. Yeah, they would go into Guardians of the Galaxy, and now we're like far away from Earth, but it always it goes far away, but then it comes back in and interacts with that core again. There's always that core, and I think that's what makes people care about it, is that, you have these stories that are very closely, tightly connected to each other, where if you're following one of them, you get to care about the other characters as well. You can't really be just an Iron Man fan, because if you're an Iron Man fan, you have to watch the Avengers to see what happens to Iron Man, right? And if you're a Hulk fan, you have to watch the Captain America movie because Hulk is a major character in it. And, stuff like that. Like, these characters, sure, they have their own stories, but they're also very tightly woven into each other. They are major characters in each other's stories. And moreover, the story of the universe as a whole sort of builds on itself, The Avengers storyline, it's the storyline of Thor and the storyline of Iron Man, and these things all interacting with each other. But the storyline of the whole thing continues, it expands, it changes until it built up to Infinity War. And by that time, you care about the story of this whole universe so much. It's all these characters coming together to fight one big threat, right? That exact sort of thing is harder to do in paper computer games, but I feel like it can and has been done. And, that's what I used to do with Balzac Lobotron, for example, right? I feel like Balzac Lobotron, it starts out as a new story. It starts out pretty far away from everything else. But as you get into the game, it very quickly ties itself into what you know. Zuvak is there, Ginkus is there, and Balzac Lobotron sort of, even though it's a new story that ties together all these threads that you've come to care about in paper computer games history. So I feel like this whole time I've been doing this YouTube channel, the same criticism that I levied against the paper games community, I'm now levying that against myself. I missed the same opportunity that I was saying that they were missing. It's something that, to me, when I was looking at the paper games community, it felt obvious. It felt like there was this big hole at the center of what they were doing. It's like they built this big, beautiful structure, but then there's this big, obvious hole, and I could see it, but nobody else could see it. And I'm like, oh my God, all you have to do is build this thing with the shared universe, and then it'll work, right? But now I'm starting to feel like I fell into the same trap. I built this whole thing. And, and I thought I was building a shared universe, but really, these are all totally different stories. And sure, they do have cameos of each other. Sure, Zuvak will randomly show up in something else, but we don't really spend a lot of time with the core storylines. There isn't like a main status quo that you go back to again and again and again. How like in the MCU, there's the Avengers, right? There's this group where, you keep checking in with what the Avengers are doing. There's this central team that the whole sort of universe, even like the far-flung stuff like the Guardians of the Galaxy, interacts with. And, that's sort of the center of the whole thing, And I feel like, that is sort of an opportunity I've been missing. We did do that in Balzac Lobotron because you sort of create this alliance with Zuvak and Ginkus. You work with these people who are classic PCG characters. It ties together all these threads of paper computer games, and it creates opportunities for more stuff to tie into it as well. I think some of you guys have done a really good job of that. I think Epic Worlds PCG, a lot of the games he made tied into the Balzac Globotron lore I made, and it tied into Ginkis and stuff like that. But there's so many great game series that have come out of the community. Stuff like the Gnome series, stuff like Agent Peanut, and all that lore is great. My issue is that this stuff is so far away from the central story, it might as well not be in the same universe, right? I've played a couple of the Agent Peanut games. I played the original one by Salman. I played, one of the new ones, I think, by HMB Tiger. But I feel like it's mostly its own story, Has Agent Peanut ever met Ginkis? Has he ever met Zuvak? I mean, probably. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure you guys will let me know down in the comments. They probably have at least at one point. But I feel like this is a missed opportunity. I'm not saying these series shouldn't exist. These series are beautiful. I love Agent Peanut. I love the Gnome Saga. I love the Archangel Saga. This stuff is great, but I feel like we need to build more creative tissue between these things, right? And that's kind of what I want to do. And I feel like I've been thinking about this for a while, but I feel like this is kind of a new direction for my paper computer games, is that I want to focus more on the core storyline. I want to focus more on building connections between these stories that the community's built and that has grown to care about. And there's examples of people doing that for sure. Think of Team Apex, for example, making sort of basically literally like an Avengers or a Justice League of major PCG characters. I think that's exactly the sort of thing I need to be doing. In fact, when I first saw Team Apex, I was kind of like, how come I never did that? What a missed opportunity. It's I'm the main PCG channel guy. I made Balzac Globotron. I was sort of the head honcho of the PCG universe, at least at the beginning. And I just never made some sort of a Justice League of PCG characters. It's such an obvious concept. This universe really existed. Why wouldn't these characters sort of team up with each other, or at least have some sort of a network? So yeah, I don't know. That's sort of the new direction I kind of want to go in, I want to build more connections to this stuff. I want to focus more on a main story. And more than that, I want to build a story where you can actually get to care about the characters, where we're actually developing character over time. That's another problem, is that I feel like in a lot of these games, sure, Zuvak will show up. A lot of people will make a game where Zuvak shows up. But Zuvak, I feel like Zuvak, Tutorial Bot, Ginkis, all those characters, I feel like the problem is that they've sort of become icons almost. You put them in a game and they're just there in a game. It's hey, it's Zuvak. Oh, hey, I know that guy. And then that's kind of it, there's exceptions to that for sure. Some of you guys have done some really great character work with some of these characters. One that comes to mind is Pat Dan, aka Yak. Pat Dan made some really killer Zuvak PCGs and also comics about Zuvak. That really got into his psychology, which is great. I think that's the exact kind of thing we need more of. I feel like even stuff like that just sort of gets lost in the shuffle, which is no fault of Pat Dan's. I feel like that's my fault because it gets lost in the shuffle because we don't see Zuvak on a regular basis. There's no ongoing storyline where where things happen to him and there's a new thing and another thing and another thing. And you can follow his story, how he evolves and changes over time. Because there isn't that central story, when you do something interesting, like a psychological story about Zuvak, I feel like it gets lost because it's a psychological story about a character that we don't really spend that much time with. He's used mostly as an icon. He's used mostly as a cameo. He shows up and sure, he'll help you solve a puzzle or two and that's it, So yeah, that's what I want to do here. So I want to build sort of an ongoing storyline. And that means, what I mean by that is I feel like I want to spend more time with each set of characters, with each series. and really build on it, really develop it. Like, one thing I notice about the success of the TCG community, right, is that in the TCG community, like, a TCG channel will, when they're making a new TCG, they really devote themselves to it, to that game. Half the time, the TCG channel will rename their channel after that game. Like, almost every video will be about that game in one way or another. They'll either be explaining the lore of that game, they'll be opening booster packs of that game, they'll be showing how they designed that game, really exploring that game. I think there's an opportunity to do that with PCGs too. You can really focus on one series, really spend a lot of time with it. I failed to do that, and I think that's a missed opportunity on my part. I think I can do better, and I want to do better. And I like, so let me lay out my sort of my plan in a little bit more, detail. So first of all, the first thing I want to do is I want to, finish the Lives of Genghis, right? I've been teasing that forever. I've been thinking about it forever. I got kind of stuck on the fact that it is a little bit difficult. It's a very ambitious project, kind of like Balzac Lobotron, and that intimidated me. That's kind of the problem. But I still want to finish it, so I think that's my first PCG priority. After that, I kind of feel like I want to get back into the Balzac Lobotron series, I've eternally been saying, I'm going to make Balzac Lobotron Part 2. It's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But I never actually, moved towards actually doing that, right? I think it's time to make Balzac Lobotron Part 2. I think it's time to make it, and I think it's time to make it. That's what I have to say about that. And I think if I want to make, I think I want to, sort of hold myself to a standard where for a while at least, I want to commit to focusing on the Balzac Lobotron series or games that are immediately around it. And that gives a lot of freedom, right? I can make a game about Balzac Lobotron, and then if I want to try something different, I can still make a totally different game, but it'll be a character that you met in Balzac Lobotron. Let's explore their story a little bit more, and then maybe in the next main episode of Balzac Lobotron, it'll tie more into that. So yeah, I think that's sort of the direction that I want to go in. And that's kind of exciting if I actually think about it, because there's all this lore that I've been planning for the Balzac Lobotron games. I really thought deep about this lore and, the origins of a lot of things in the Balzac Lobotron world, how everything ties into each other. And that's lore that I've never gotten to show you guys. I've never gotten to talk about because it's top secret, because I'm eventually going to do the Balzac Lobotron game, right? I want to finally do Balzac Lobotron. Stuff like the Squids in Space series, with, that Ari game, that is very close to Balzac Lobotron. That sort of is basically a spin-off of Balzac Lobotron, so that's another series I might want to continue because that's tightly connected to that. There's infinite possibilities of how you can build on that sort of central story. And I feel like if I create that central story, I'm hoping that that'll create a situation where it'll inspire you guys to build on it too. I'm hoping to do more, and I feel like the more tied in these games are and the more interconnected they are, the easier it's going to be for new people to care about. I feel like that's been the missing piece, how we've been talking about how the channel, it's hard to get, a lot of views and subscribers or whatever. I think building up over time a base of people who care about this, because there's characters that you get to know over time that you care about by watching the videos, by playing the games, I feel like that's the thing that, if you want to build a durable PCG community, you need to build. I could see the flaw, what was missing in the paper games community, but I couldn't see it in myself until now. I'm glad I finally got it, but man, this is freaking 8 years after I started this channel. I keep doing that. I keep missing the obvious flaw in what I'm doing again and again and again, and then I find it, and it's whoa, it's a revelation, but it's great. I'm glad I finally figured it out. Hopefully it's not too late to do this. Hopefully I haven't lost too many of you guys, but yeah, let me know down what you think of this in the comments. And by the way, I'm not promising exactly when any of these are going to come out, because I do have other PCG projects that I'm working on as well that are not exactly games. Those are that's my plan for the next games I'm going to make. But I am also working on the Pokemon Stop computer game that we were talking about in the Discord. That's still happening. Don't worry. The programmer is, Andre is working on that very diligently, doing a great job. We're working on a movie project that's PCG related. And I'm working on, like the new PCG shop, basically. But yeah, I think I've ranted about that long enough. But let me know down in the comments what you think. I would love your feedback. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. And PCG later.